Om. 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 Om Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyau Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Vetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamayam Tamasoma Jyotirgamayam Mrityorma Amrutam Gamayam Aviravirmayeti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. So today we begin on verse number 11. Please repeat after me. Yadaksharam Veda Vido Vadanti Vishanti Yat Yatayo Vitaragaha Yadichanto Brahmacharyam Charanti Tatte Padam Sangrahena Pravakshe. That imperishable principle which the knowers of the Vedas describe, into which aspirants bereft of all desires enter, desiring which one lives the abstinent life of a student, that goal I shall tell you in brief. So we have seen in the earlier verses how what thought is uppermost in our mind at the time of death determines the future course that the soul takes. If at that last moment, if our mind is completely centered on that highest reality, on God, then that is where we go. So that is what he's saying here. So now Krishna will describe that highest goal, that highest truth, and how to go there. So this is a prologue to that. So he says, what is the nature of that goal? That imperishable principle. Imperishable, the word you used here is akshara. Kshara means perishable. Akshara, imperishable, which the knowers of Vedas describe. In other words, that highest principle, or God, or Brahman, which is described in the Vedas, into which aspirants or spiritual seekers, bereft of all desires, enter. So as long as there are any kind of desires related to the material world, we cannot enter into the world of spirit. So it's a little bit like this. If we are tied, think about it this way. The example that Ramakrishna gives is that 4 people who had a great party one day, and they drank a lot, and then they found a boat, and so they got into the boat and then rowed whole night. And next morning they found that they were exactly in the same spot where they were, because that boat was anchored, and no amount of rowing made they couldn't make any progress. So it's not just enough to be doing a lot of meditation, a lot of prayer, because we might do a lot of prayer and meditation, but if our mind is still anchored with desires related to this material world, it's like we are anchored on this material plane. If we are anchored on this material plane, then there is no way we can go toward the spirit. You cannot have both at the same time. That is what Jesus meant when he said, you cannot serve God and mammon at the same time. You cannot do both. So sometimes when we say I need to balance my life, that I have interest in spirituality, but I don't want to go overboard. I don't want to get too spiritual. So I want to balance, which is okay. So this kind of balancing between spirit and matter means that I would like to have a little bit of spirituality, a little bit of this, which might give us some benefit from spiritual life. It will give us some amount of peace of mind, might bring a little bit of meaning into life, so you will get a little bit benefit. But then if I say, well, I want to balance everything and yet become enlightened, that's not possible. At some point, we might begin by balancing. At some point, we'll have to let go. Now, oftentimes, if the letting go becomes a painful exercise, then it's not really letting go. So when we let go of the matter to advance toward the spirit, so long as anything that is material is of value to us, it's important to us, first of all, we won't be able to let it go. And even if we forcibly try to let it go, our mind will still be there. It's like, oh my God, I had that and now I lost it. So that regret will be there. So letting go forcibly never really works. On the other hand, letting go can occur naturally. The toys that we play with when we were little children, we naturally let go of them when we become teenagers. We've got different toys to play with then. Then as we grow older, the things that were of some value to us at certain stage of life no longer have any value. And so then very painlessly, we can leave them behind and move on. That is the best way to let go. So the more we think, the more we practice, the more we take spiritual life seriously, gradually, it might be a very slow process, but gradually we will discover that things which at one point were of great value to us suddenly become, oh, now they're not such a great value anymore. And things which we didn't care for at some point suddenly become valuable. So our value system oftentimes changes, and it should. That is the sign of evolution. It's like this: when I'm a little kid and I love playing with my little toys of childhood, at some point I have to let go of them. If all through my life I'm still playing with my childhood toys, then people are going to say there's something wrong with you. So letting go is actually a sign of growing up, of evolution. And so if we are growing up, if we are developing, if we are evolving spiritually, at some time the things of this world which held value will suddenly start looking a little bit less shining. They might not have as much value before. And that's when renunciation occurs in a very natural way. So letting go happens in a very natural way. So that is what is meant here, into which aspirants bereft of all desires enter. So the desires should slip away from us in a very natural way. The more we think about it, the more we realize the value of something, we know what to let go. Desiring which one lives the abstinent life of a student, only then does the practice of self-restraint or self-control become meaningful. Otherwise, it doesn't become meaningful. For instance, let's say many people like sweets. Well, they're delicious. So the chocolate industry and the industry which makes a lot of different kinds of sweets, it's a very thriving business. And if you just tell someone, stop eating sweets, so why? I enjoy eating it. It gives me great joy. Why should I stop it? So it's very meaningful to me. On the other hand, let's say At some point, someone discovers when they go to for their annual physical or some test is done and found that, oh, there's too much sugar in the body. And I need to now be careful about how much sugar I allow to go in. And so then suddenly, keeping away from sweets becomes a meaningful practice, because I then understand the value of keeping my desire for sweets away. But unless I know why I'm doing it, I wouldn't want to give it up. So self-restraint or self-control is an important practice in spiritual life. But we must be clear of why am I controlling it? Why am I restraining any of these things? Then it's worth doing. In fact, it can bring a great joy in itself. It's called Shama Sukham, the joy that comes through self-restraint. Try it out once. There's something you greatly enjoy. And so let's say let's just hold on to sweets since we're talking about sweets. So let's say eating sweets brings you great joy. And so, of course, when you eat it, it'll bring you joy. But on some day, if you say, okay, today is an Ekadashi or is some festival or I'm going to observe fast and I'm not going to take it. So you're going to miss something which you enjoy normally. But if you are able to decide to do something and you succeed in doing so, you become successful in your attempt. That success in the attempt also has a joy of its own. It's called Shama Sukham. And so while restraining oneself might seem as if we are missing out on things, but the practice of restraining itself has a joy of its own. So that is what Krishna will describe now. That goal, which is described in the Vedas, into which those people who have given up all worldly desires will enter, and desiring which, that goal, people learn to practice self-restraint. So you'll see the word desire comes twice here. So you give up all desire for material thing and you increase your desire for spirit. The two are related. Think about it this way. If we have a fixed amount of capacity to desire anything, so say this is my desiring quota. So now how I want to distribute that quota is up to me. The more I use of that quota towards perishable things of the world, the less I will have towards the spiritual things. The more I put it here, the less I will have it there. So how you want to divide your capacity to desire anything is a decision every one of us has to make. So verses 12 and 13, we'll do it together. Please chant with me. Sarvadvarani Sanyamya Manohridi Niruddhya Murdhnyadhayat Manah Pranam Asthito Yoga Dharanam Om Ityekaksharam Brahma Vyaharan Mamanusmaran Yaprayati Tyajan Deham Sayati Paramam Gatim. Controlling all the inlets, confining the mind to the heart, fixing the life breath in the head, betaking himself to absorption in yoga, repeating the monosyllable Om, which is Brahman, and thinking of me, he who departs leaving the body attains the highest goal. So what are the things we need to do at that last moment? Controlling all the inlets. So organs are considered as inlets, the dwara, the doors, the doorway through which all the sensory inputs enter. So all the visuals enter through this door. all the sounds enter through this door. So these are the 5 senses are considered the 5 doors. So controlling them, in other words, which is why really when we try to meditate, it's easier to meditate by closing the eyes. Essentially what we are doing, I'm closing the door which allows visuals to go in. You might put earplugs if you want, but normally we try to sit in a very quiet spot. Again, we may not really physically close the door, but we at least try to find a place where there is less of sound data going in, and so on. Again, generally the good practice is not to be eating while meditating. You see, it's like this. So should we eat while we are meditating? No. But can we meditate while we are eating? Well, of course we should be meditating all the time. It's like they said that one person went to his pastor and said, "Oh, pastor, can I smoke while I'm praying?" And then the pastor scolded him. He said, "What, can't you control your habit of smoking even for the few minutes that you pray?" And then he went next day and again asked, "But can I pray while I'm smoking?" And then he said, "Wow, you can pray all the time. Praying is something that can be done all the time." Anyway, so the idea is this. While it's not impossible to meditate while you are eating, but recognize that there is some kind of the sensory data with regard to taste. The world in the form of taste is already already going in through the door. So my mind is already getting divided because it is becoming aware of the taste. So I will not be able to give my full mind to God, which is why we try to shut out the senses as much as possible. That is what is meant here by controlling all the inlets, confining the mind to the heart. Here, heart means the spirit, the Atman, and the mind. So controlling the senses and controlling the mind. Now, controlling the senses is difficult, but at least there is something mechanical we can do about it. You can shut your eyes, find a quiet place, stop eating. There's something we can do with the senses. Now, how do you shut the mind? That's not so easy. And that's the difficulty most of us have at the beginning. That my mind is just wandering everywhere. How can I control my mind? And that happens through practice. And so one way of doing that is the more let me put it this way. Where does the mind normally go? Effortlessly, easily. Where would the mind go even if you don't want it to go? Usually to a place or a person or any object which is important to you, which you love, which has some value to you. So when we are trying to meditate on God, and if we have difficulty meditating on God, if we find that my mind is wandering to other places and things and people, that is because, it's not a rocket science, it's simple. That there are other things in my mental universe. There are things which are more urgent, more valuable, more meaningful than God on whom I'm trying to meditate. And that's why even when I want to meditate on God, the mind will still go to something which it finds more valuable, something which it finds more attractive. So what we need to do is very clear. Can I convince myself, even if it is for a few minutes, that for the next 15 minutes or 20 minutes, God can be a very hazy idea. So for most of us, what it implies is that any ideal which we naturally associate with God. You simply say God. We all might use the word God, but we all might mean very different things by it. Oftentimes, it's usually some aspect of the divine, in some form, some quality, which will naturally associate with God, that is what we can think of. Otherwise, God is a pretty hazy concept. So, can I convince myself that the next few minutes, and so that particular ideal of God with which we are naturally able to relate ourselves is called the Ishta, our chosen ideal. So, for the next few minutes, can I convince myself that that's the most important thing in my life? That there is nothing more important to me right now than that. If we can convince ourselves, then it will be easier to hold the mind there. If we are not able to convince ourselves, the mind will automatically go some places, some things, some ideas which it feels is more urgent. That's the difficulty. There is one Patanjali Yoga Sutra, there is one aphorism which says, Vitarka badhane pratipaksha bhavanam, which simply means that when we are overwhelmed with certain emotion, certain idea, certain force, and we don't want to be overwhelmed by that, we want the mind to go someplace else, then we have to think of the contrary idea, contrary thought. In other words, if my mind is filled with anger, then the more I think about the object of my anger, I'm just kind of feeding into it. I'm just going to get more irritated, more angry. Now, if I can consciously, at that moment, try to think of some either kindness, or I try to think of something funny, or force yourself to smile, do anything which is contrary, which doesn't go with anger. And you will find that you might be able to overcome anger. And actually, I think forcing yourself to smile if you are angry or irritated is really very helpful, because it's very physical. Just you are adjusting some muscles on your face to force yourself to smile. That smile may not be very natural. It will be a forced smile. But nevertheless, if you can remember to smile, even in the worst of situations, you might be able to have a better control over yourself. Because you see, it's not really possible to be smiling and getting angry at the same time. It's not possible to be smiling and being nasty. I mean, you could probably be sarcastic while smiling, but not really vicious while smiling. So the idea is this. So try to do something completely contrary, either physically or mentally. If your mind is filled with hatred, try to fill it with love. Again, if love is too hazy an idea, try to think of some person or something towards which you feel love, by which the love will be generated, and it then kind of pushes out that hatred. Exactly in the same way, one other way to understand that verse, in the commentaries it's mentioned that if I can, let's go back to that example of eating sweets and sugar. So if I have a sugar problem and eating sweets is not a good thing for me, so if my mind is overwhelmed with the desire for sweets, now what should I do? One way to deal with that is, if I can consciously at that moment think about the destructive effect of eating that sweet on me, that will prevent me from doing it. It's like, oftentimes what happens is this: even those who have been advised by their doctors or by their physical condition that don't eat sweets, the mind is not really our friend. The mind says, oh, there's a little bit is not going to do anything, and then we take it. So the mind is really acting like our enemy. But at that moment, if I can, I don't have anything personally against sweets. It's just one example I'm giving. Can be applied in any other situation also. But at that moment, if I can consciously remind, no, if I take this, then my sugar level will increase and they'll cause blah, 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 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the kind of problems can occur. I will then suffer. You can paint as bleak and dark a picture as you want. But the more you're able to do it, the less you would want to take it. And contrarily, if there is something that needs to be done, like say meditation, and then you feel, if I meditate on God, then that's going to bring greater meaning into my life. That's going to give me everything that I seek in life, more freedom, more perfection, more joy. And so this is something very important, and getting distracted is actually not. So the more we try to see the positive side of what we want to do and the negative side of what we should not be doing, the easier it becomes then to desire what we should be desiring. So that's the idea. And then it's possible to control the mind. So confining the mind to the heart, fixing the life breath in the head, in other words, concentrating fully within, betaking himself to absorption in yoga, in other words, practicing this deep meditation. Yoga is to join, to connect oneself to God. So separating ourselves from anything that is away from my spiritual ideal and connecting to the ideal. Repeating the monosyllable Om. Om is the most sacred sound in the Vedanta tradition. So you might remember Sri Ramakrishna says that it comes very often in his conversations that Sandhya merges in the Gayatri. The Gayatri emerges in Om. So in the beginning, Sandhya is a very elaborate ritual that's done. But when a person does it for an extended period of time, then a stage is reached when it's no longer necessary to do the whole physical ritual. Then it's enough simply to repeat the Gayatri mantra. And when one does that for a sufficient number of time, it brings about sufficient purity and clarity in the mind, then it's not even necessary then to repeat the entire Gayatri mantra. It's enough to say Om. And when then Om is done for a sufficient amount of time, the mind becomes so refined, so clear, so pure, that automatically that repetition ceases on its own. So from the sound of Om, you go to the truth which is beyond all sound. From the name, you go to the nameless. From the form, you go to the formless. In the case of many of us, it'll be the mantra that we have been given by our Guru. So we do that, repeat that mantra, follow that process. Gradually you will find that mantra becomes our best companion. No matter where we are, it's always there within. So gradually that mantra then, it's enough then to repeat simply that monosyllable, the beginning, the seed, the bija of that mantra. And that itself finally merges us into that divine reality on which we are meditating. So that's the stages, the evolution that occurs, which is Brahman, and thinking of me, he who departs, leaving the body, attains the highest goal. So this is what is expected of every spiritual seeker. Now, we might say, when that last moment comes, I should be doing all this, closing all the inlets, covering the mind, fixing the mind inside, and all of this. Will I have time to do all this? And which is a very practical question. And the answer is this. If that's the only time in my life I'm going to attempt to do it, then I won't have time for it. But if I begin practicing it now, although that last moment of my life may be far away, hopefully very far away, but if I can practice it now, then I'll be able to do it quickly. And that's why abhyas, as we saw earlier, in verse 8 of this thing, you can see Krishna says, Abhyasa yoga yuktena. So practicing abhyasa, this abhyasa means practice. So it's only through practice that it occurs. You can see, even for musicians or artists or whichever is your field of study or research or work, in the beginning when you are new, it takes a lot of time to kind of just get ready, to get into it. But once you have done something repeatedly over time, that practice itself, you can then quickly do it. You don't need too much time for preparation. So if we can practice like this every day, which is why a daily practice is very important, then we will be ready, because none of us knows when that last moment is going to be. And since we don't know, it's better to start practicing it right now. One important point here: he who departs leaving the body attains the highest goal. This is an important point and a little subtle point. What does departing mean? As I mentioned to you before, that in order for me to go anywhere, let me give a more concrete example. Let's say in this particular room in which we are all sitting, it's possible for me to go from one place in this room to another place because I'm smaller than this room. The room is big, I'm small. That is why I can go from point A to point B. What if I was so big that I filled the whole room? So now just imagine I'm filling the whole room. Now, if I'm filling the whole room, can I go anywhere in that room? I really can't go, because in a way, I'm already everywhere in that room. I'm already filling the room. But I cannot go from point A to point B because I'm already there. So it's a somewhat paradoxical situation. If I'm everywhere, I cannot go anywhere. So when people die, and then we speak about them going somewhere. So when people die, this cover of the body, they get out of this cover of the body because the body is just lifeless, it's just lying. And so they say, and then we know that the person is different, because then we say, oh, this person had left me and gone. So clearly we see that this person occupied that body and then left and gone. But if that person has gone somewhere, it means that person is still limited, right? If that person had been already, after the body was left behind, if the person had become infinite, then there was no question of going anywhere. Where would you go? You're already everywhere. So right now here he says, he who departs leaving the body. In other words, I'm still limited, and I'm limited by the mind. So death is really the death of the body. It's not the death of the mind. The mind that we have now is the mind that we have had in all of our past births. It's been with us for a very long time. The body is relatively fresh, just for a few years old, and will remain with us only for a few more years, and then we'll get a new body. So bodies are more perishable than the mind. So the mind has been with us for a long time. And because the mind is not infinite, the mind is finite, it's possible for the soul then to leave the body. So what does it mean attaining the highest goal? If the highest goal is to become infinite and I am still finite, so how do you attain it? So there are two ways of attaining that ultimate freedom according to Vedanta. So one is called Satyomukti, that is, you become free, enlightened immediately. So say, and it can happen any moment. Just like death can come any moment, you can become enlightened any moment. So maybe one of us before 8:30 today. Don't laugh, it could be. Through grace of God, anything is possible. So suddenly we realize, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not the ego, and you become enlightened. So when you become enlightened, well, the body doesn't vaporize and disappear. You're still there. So then you'll continue to live as free, living free in the body. So such people are called Jivan Muktas. They are Jivan, they are still living, but they have become Muktas. Now, when such a person who has already become enlightened dies, that person does not depart anywhere, because the body is left behind, but the mind also is left behind. This person is no more enclosed in the mind, because such a person knows that I'm not the mind. So the body, mind, everything returns to its source right here. So enlightened people don't depart anywhere. So if we depart at the time of death anywhere, we are not enlightened then yet. So then we go, depending on the kind of karma that we have done, we might go to some different planes. And these books describe any number of loka. There is Surya Loka, Chandra Loka, and the highest loka is sometimes called the Brahma Loka, the world of Brahma. Not Brahman, Brahma. So that's keep that in mind, because sometimes that distinction can be confusing. So if you say Brahma, he is one of the Vedantic trinity. Brahma, who projects the world, Vishnu, who sustains it, and Shiva, into whom the world is absorbed. So that Brahma is masculine, even gender-wise. But Brahman is a neuter gender. It's neither masculine nor feminine. So when you say Brahman, it's not referring to any person. But Brahma is a specific deity in the Vedantic tradition. So Brahmaloka is a world of Brahma. And that is considered like the 5-star of heavens. So there are many kinds of heavens. So if you say, well, like, I want to go to the best heaven, the highest heaven, then that would be Brahmaloka. And so think about it this way. So people who have done exceptionally good work, really wonderful people, but not necessarily with a desire for spirituality or anything, but very good people, they will go to this Brahmaloka. And because it's a 5-star heaven, you can have all the facilities there. I think many people nowadays, even if they go to heaven or thing, first thing they may want there is whether Wi-Fi is available. So exceptionally good people might go to Brahmaloka, and moderately good people might go to some other swargas and live there for some time. But the amount of good, no matter how much good you have done, it's still a limited entity. So after you have had your sufficient fruits of the good work you have done, then you come back again and you are reborn somewhere. But what if you are a spiritual seeker and you have been sincerely, earnestly practicing your meditation and prayer, and you have made good amount of progress, but when death comes, you have not become enlightened yet. You're a little bit short of the final push. It's like you're running a marathon. You have come pretty close, but then you just say, I can't do it anymore. And you don't reach the finishing line. So if that's our condition, so we are spiritual seekers, but death has come a little bit earlier than you thought, and you haven't become enlightened yet. And so, but then you couldn't have done all this unless we were really good people. So we, like those other good people, we will also go to Brahmaloka. Okay? But because we are spiritual seekers, because all through life we have had this habit, this abhyasa of meditating daily, thinking of God, praying, doing all the right things, what will we do when we go to Brahmaloka? Well, if that's what has become my second nature, even after going to Brahmaloka, rather than spending my time drinking a somaras and all dancing with the apsaras, it's impossible to do it because Brahmaloka, everything is available there. But it's possible to get distracted. Even there, when distractions are everywhere. Don't think there are only distractions here. So it's possible to get distracted after going to heaven with all those wonderful things available and say, okay, I've did enough meditation while I was on earth. Now let me have some fun. And I might stop meditating there. On the other hand, if I've been an earnest spiritual seeker, and as I said, a little bit only was remaining for my enlightenment. So even after going to that heaven, I will not get distracted. I will say, no, I must continue to practice my viveka, discernment. And because remember, in the same mind that's gone there, the mind is not different. So if my mind is disciplined here, the mind will be disciplined there. So even after going to Brahmalok, I will say, let me find some nice tree and sit under it and meditate. And I will continue to meditate even after going there. And then what little was remaining for my enlightenment, rather than having to be reborn here and do it, I finish that little there itself and then become liberated from there. So that is called krama mukti, gradual liberation. So even if I'm not entirely enlightened, even if I'm partially enlightened, but pretty close to enlightenment, I won't have to be reborn again. I can finish that little bit from wherever I am in this cosmos and then be liberated from there. So two ways of becoming enlightened. Either get enlightened right now, immediately, or say, okay, let me make enough progress and then continue working on my spiritual practice wherever I go. So that's the significance of departing, leaving the body. Because this question can come, if I'm departing, how can I attain the highest goal? So I'm attaining the highest goal gradually. It's almost like a halfway house. On your way to enlightenment, you continue and then you finish there. But don't aim for that gradual liberation. Aim for immediate liberation. If it comes, that's great. Even if it doesn't, then you always have the backup as a gradual liberation. But don't kind of set your goal like, all right, it's not possible to be liberated now. Let me go slowly and then gradually do it. Best is to always, that's why they say, have big dreams. Always aim for the highest. If you aim for the highest, chances are you will get it. Even if you don't get it, you will go pretty high. But if you have a kind of a very low goal, then that's not very helpful. Anyway, so this is a very important two verses. So you have any questions, thoughts, ideas? Yes.
So with respect to aspirations that pertain to your work, let's say, success in your career or profession, is that in some ways conflicting with the ultimate spiritual goal of reaching enlightenment, or is that under the umbrella of karma yoga, so it's not necessarily incompatible?
No, if you're doing your work in a spirit of yoga, then it can connect you to the highest thing. But let's say even someone who is doing karma yoga, if such a person also has meditation as a part of his or her practice, then when I'm meditating, if my mind is still being pulled towards the work, that means I have not developed sufficient power of detachment. That's because one of the key practices in karma yoga is the practice of detachment. That's where the training of the mind comes in. That if I make my mind subservient, mind is our instrument. It should really do what I want it to do. And so karma yoga would mean whichever work I'm doing, is my mind trained enough? Am I able to order my mind for the next 15 minutes? This is what you do. And usually if I enjoy doing what I'm doing, the mind will automatically get attached to it without difficulty. But the problem is, we often do not have as much power of detachment as attachment. So if I enjoy doing something, my mind will automatically go and hook onto it. But when it's time for me to do something else, I'm not then able to withdraw the mind from here and put it on that second thing. That's the problem. And so karma yoga is a practice which will help me not only to attach myself to any task with full force, but also detach from it if and when it is necessary. Okay? Yeah. course. Yeah.
Swamiji, in Sandhya meets Gayatri, Gayatri becomes Om. What is Sandhya? Is it evening time?
Yeah, Sandhya is, it means, literally it means evening time. Sandhya is one of the rituals that is taught at the time of thread ceremony, which is done. It's a very beautiful, really, kind of a practice. There's some mantras to be chanted. There are some ways of doing it. So people do that, and along with that, they are supposed to chant the Gayatri, practice Gayatri. And so oftentimes what Ramakrishna says is that ritual, doing that ritual, purifies us, strengthens us enough that after some time, we may not have to do that entire ritual. It will be enough to simply repeat the Gayatri. Then even when you have done the Gayatri for some time, your mind will become clear enough, it may not even be necessary to chant the whole Gayatri. And it might be just enough just to say Om. It's a little bit like when you have a new apprentice, say, to do any task. In the beginning, you'll have to give them very elaborate instructions from every little thing. Do it this way, do it this way, do it this way. Then when they have been doing it for a while, then you may not need to give such elaborate instructions. Just a little bit, okay, do this is enough. And then when they have done that for a little more time, then simply just a nod might be enough. It's a little bit like that. Yeah.
Swamiji, when you say the control, so we should be the master of our own mind, so we can control the mind. But mind is kind of controlling us and driving us where we, even don't want to go. So when we say we should control mind, who are we? What is we?
Good question. Very good question. The mind is already kind of become fractured. So our whole mind is not doing anything at all. The different parts of our mind want to do different things. Which is, one of the reasons we experience stress is because the mind is pulling us in different directions. So sometimes the emotional aspect of the mind attracts us somewhere. So emotionally we feel drawn somewhere. Intellectually we feel drawn someplace else. There's a part of the mind says, oh, I love doing this. And intellectually said, no, that's not a good thing to do. So the mind is already divided. So one part of the mind, sometimes called the higher mind, is a mind which is kind of tuned to all the spiritual ideals. The rest of the mind, that part of the mind which is kind of become a slave to its habits, is again just by habit goes someplace else. So when we say we must control the mind, it's actually one part of the mind trying to control the rest of the mind. And that's why we feel a kind of a tug of war, which I say, oh, I'm not able to decide. Sometimes I feel like doing this, sometimes I feel like doing that. So really, my mind is kind of having all this push and pull going on inside. And which side will win will depend on which side is stronger. So what we need to do is that tiny little corner in the mind which is kind of tuned to or which resonates with the higher ideals in life, we need to make that stronger and stronger and stronger, so that it's able to kind of pull along the rest of the mind along with it. Think about it this way. Say in a house, oftentimes we might have, say, one designated room or some corner. For many who are devoted to God, religious people always have some kind of a small shrine somewhere in a separate room or in some corner. And we do feel that corner where we have our little shrine is somehow a little bit different from the rest of the house. That you just feel a kind of sense of sanctity around that space, because that's the place you normally go, you bow down, you pray, maybe you do a little bit of worship. So it acquires a little bit of sanctity. Although the whole home is your home, that place is somehow a little bit special. Now, gradually over time, I recognize that when God dwells in my home, God is not simply in that little shrine. God is filling my whole home. And so gradually that little shrine, the area of my little shrine, that physically that area might still remain small, but in my mind, the sphere of that shrine can come, hopefully one day, and fill the whole house. So no matter in which part of the house I am, which room I am, I will still feel God dwells here. So that's the goal. So all of us who are spiritual seekers, there's definitely some part, some corner of the mind which recognizes the value of all this, which recognizes the importance of these higher, dealing with the higher questions, the deeper questions. But we also have what we say, well, there are other responsibilities, other duties. So it's like if I say the house, which is my mind, is some corner of my house is occupied by spiritual matters. The rest of the house is, well, a lot of other matters. And so how much more influence this little corner will exert in the rest of the mind, that is where the controlling thing comes in. Is it okay? Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah.
Swamiji, is it possible to detach the mind without attaching it to something else?
No. I think the mind by its very nature will get attached somewhere. If it doesn't get attached anywhere, it'll then disintegrate, I think. Which is great. That's the goal. That's why I said when an enlightened being dies, an enlightened being doesn't depart anywhere. Not only the body disintegrates, the mind also disintegrates. But disintegrating, I mean, that's the problem with language. Even people with severe mental illnesses can kind of a disintegration occur. So I'm really not referring to an unhealthy disintegration of the mind. I'm just saying about, that's why that it's probably not a very good word. But that's the idea. If mind is a material entity, as long as it is functional, it is going to take me somewhere, heaven or hell. So for an enlightened being who is no more enclosed in the body or mind, all of these body and mind return back to their source. It's only in that sense I'm using the word disintegration, not in some kind of a mental illness. So I think it's always good to keep the mind engaged with something. And if the mind has to remain engaged with something, it had better be engaged with something positive and healthy. Because if we don't ourselves decide where the mind should be, then the mind will make its own decision. And if the mind makes its own decision, we have no idea where the fellow will go. I mean, it's a little bit like this. If your dog is trained, then you don't have to chain the dog and say, well, the dog knows where to be at what time. That's fine. But if your dog is not trained, then you better tell the dog, now you come and sit here or go there. So when our mind is trained, then it really doesn't matter. The mind will know exactly where it should go and attach itself to. But so long as it is not trained, it's better that we be constantly behind that mind, telling it where to be. That's why there was that saying, oftentimes when we were children, we were told, the empty mind is a devil's workshop. So, because sometimes I've heard people say, who try to practice meditation, just remove all thoughts from the mind. I really don't advise that. I don't think that's very helpful. It's much more helpful to hold the mind onto something which is uplifting, something which is healthy, something which is positive. That is a better way to do it, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
Swami, my question is through using my mantra, I follow from the world of forms to the formless reality, right? So it's mantra by itself become the way, right?
Yes, so you continue repeating your mantra as you were taught, and then you really don't have to do anything. The mantra will do whatever needs to be done. And then gradually, on its own, you'll find the sound of the mantra will take you to a state beyond sound. The form that you are meditating on itself will melt into that infinite consciousness. So you just keep doing it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Srikant, yeah.
Swamiji, you're talking about the training the mind and tell the mind and fix the mind in particular thing. And we always, I think, studied in the other scriptures that we are not the mind, we are not the body. So if we are doing that, we are different from mind, we are not the mind.
That is why you can tell the mind. If you were the mind, you couldn't have told it. But you're not your dog. You're able to tell the dog, right? Do this.
Okay.
That's why you're able to tell the mind. Yeah. Okay, so we will stop here today. And when we meet next week, we will start with verse number 14. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagatgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. We bow down to Ramakrishna and Holy Mother again and again. On Sunday, our subject will be Community, a Vedanta View. Next Wednesday, we will continue with the study of the Gita. And on Saturday and Tuesday, our Arati and meditation will continue as usual. So you're welcome for all of these programs. We'll conclude with a prayer now on page 3 of your books. Om. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.